Open letter to CSW's founder-president Mr. Mervyn Thomas, who ignore the truth and support terrorist acts. It might be wondering who wrote this open letter to founder-president Mr. Mervyn Thomas of Christian Solidarity Worldwide, CSW. I am simply an ordinary citizen who loves our country and people. Particularly, I am an ordinary person who cannot accept one-sided accusations and pressure from international organizations and individuals that aim our country and people to be in ruins. We, the people, have seen the statement on Myanmar released by your CSW organization on 4 November 2025. We wish to deny categorically that your statement is merely unfounded in arbitrary allegations against the government of Myanmar and the Tatmadaw, and a propaganda document that lacks factual validity and impartiality. You echo other people's opinion, without truly understanding the current political situation in Myanmar and the real circumstances on the ground. Instead, you rely only on incorrect information distorted by domestic as well as foreign destructive media and terrorist groups according to their own agendas. Such undisciplined statements not only show disrespect toward the country and its citizens, but also amount to an insult that encourages and supports the terrorists who seek to disturb and destroy peace and stability. Hence, this open letter is the voice of an ordinary citizen who actually lives inside Myanmar and is experiencing the violent acts by NUG, PDF and terrorist groups under the name of ethnic armed groups, aiming to respond to your groundless allegations. First, what you need to understand is that the conflicts and the destruction as well as losses happening in the country are not because the organization has been deliberately targeting civilians as you accuse, but because the all-out destruction path pursued by terrorist groups under the name of NUG, CRPH and PDF groups borne by the extremist factions of the NLD party. They are making the attempts to achieve their self-serving political goals through violent means. The international community already knows that terrorists are arbitrarily killing any citizens who do not support them. While your CSW organization is seriously expressing its deep concern about religious discrimination and lack of fairness, a question has been raised. Why don't you say a single word about the civilians who were killed by terrorist groups? Why doesn't your research mention about 5,767 unarmed, innocent people who lost their lives because of the killings by terrorists? Why do you ignore the cases of 88 Buddhist monks and 2 nuns who were killed by terrorists? Why does your CSW organization turn a blind eye to the terrorists' killings of thousands of civil servants, including 78 teachers who teach new generation and administrators? Do the terrorists' bombings and arson attacks against the 560 public schools, education buildings, bridges, hospitals and administrative offices fit any standards of your religious freedom? Myanmar's Tatmadaw is the nation's legitimate defense institution, and it has the responsibility to counter terrorist act and to safeguard the lives, homes and property of all citizens from the terrorists' acts of violence. All of the actions of the Tatmadaw are just systematically conducting counter-terrorism operation in line with the rules of engagement, RO. There is absolutely no discrimination or targeted attacks based on religion as you accuse. We, the people, will respond your alleged statement published on the 4th of November, letting you know the right facts. Citing the Forbes network, you claimed that more than 220 Christian churches were destroyed and 85 Christian monks were killed. It was a fraud. You cited the International Humanitarian Law, IHL. However, you deliberately left off the part where IHL explicitly prohibits the use of places of worship for military purpose. In reality, in many conflict-affected areas including Chin State, CNF, CNA, and PDF, terrorist groups borne by the NUG are deliberately committing crimes, such as abusing religious buildings as defensive posts, using as temporary barracks, and planting landmines near places of worship. These CNF, CNA and PDF groups are disturbing the government's administrative mechanism, destroying the lives, homes and property of peaceable civilians in Chin State. As a result, fighting has broken out in regions where there had been no rebellion in successive eras. In other words, these clashes are broken out by the misguided political ego of the NUG group, which attempts to achieve its political goals through violent armed means. These battles are not caused by the Tatmada's military operations. The Tatmada is just attacking terrorist insurgents to deter the terrorists' violent acts against unarmed civilians and to restore the rule of law and stability. The Tatmada has never wantonly targeted or attacked any religious buildings. The damages are just the unavoidable collateral damage occurring within the battle zone, especially because terrorist groups attack the Tatmada by employing churches and pagodas for sheltering themselves. You, who cited IHL, should understand the point that once a legally protected location is used as a military outpost, the place loses its protected status and becomes a legitimate military target. So, the real culprits responsible for the wreckage of churches are the terrorists themselves. Freedom of religion is already guaranteed under the Section 34 of the Constitution of Myanmar. The following is a list of religious buildings that belong to religions other than Buddhism, which is the special position in Myanmar, for your awareness. In accordance with the Constitution, everyone has the freedom of religious right to practice their own religions, including Buddhism. The government led by the current acting president and State Security and Peace Commission (SSPC), chairman of the Republic of the Union of Myanmar, attends various religious festivals, depending on the time free from work. However, terrorists are taking an advantage of religious festivals in urban areas. They deliberately attempt to carry out acts of violence and bombings by taking shelter themselves among crowds, neighborhoods and churches. Consequently, relevant administrative officials are carrying out necessary security checks and temporary restraint to protect the lives of the people. This is not targeting Christianity. It is solely to prevent the acts of terrorists and to provide the safety of worshipper people. Officials do not consider Christianity and Islam as foe, but consider the terrorists as enemy. Among your accusations, the easily verifiable falsehood is the claim regarding the Mandalay earthquake that struck on the 28th of March 2025. You have accused that the order stating that the collapsed Christian churches and mosques may only be rebuilt in their original form is discriminatory. Again, you have portrayed this restriction as the reason why many long-standing Christian churches had collapsed to the ground. I seriously object that your allegation is totally incorrect. The earthquake affected people of all religions. The Mandalay earthquake that struck on the 28th of March did not selectively target or discriminate people and buildings based on religion. Your research intentionally left off the damage to Mandalay's world-renowned Buddhist heritage. The Kuthoda Pagoda, a UNESCO World Heritage listed site, suffered severe destruction. Likewise, many significant Buddhist sites including Shwegugi Temple, Mae Nu Ok Kiong, Mae Nu Brick Monastery, and the Mingan Pagoda were also heavily damaged. Reconstruction efforts are for everyone. The government and the Ministry of Religious Affairs and Culture have preserved, repaired, and reconstructed more than 1,700 damaged ancient structures. The term "in their original form" is an international standard. The policy for rebuilding in the original form that you accuse of being a discriminatory restriction is, in fact, not discriminatory at all. It is an international standard for historical preservation, to be applied equally to Buddhism, Christianity, Islam heritage alike, in line with the guidelines by the experts of International Heritage Preservation Organization, such as UNESCO and International Council on Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, to ensure that the value of ancient heritages is not to be destroyed. Since you intentionally distorted the point and incited religious conflict, it is vividly proved that the CSW group's goal is not targeted for unity but for disintegration. In addition to accusations, the points you stated under the guise of demands reveal a colonial mindset, as if you want to control the sovereign nation's internal affairs from afar. Among your demands, the most unacceptable insulting remark is that you called for immediate repeal of the People's Military Service Law that came into force in 2024. What Mr. Mervyn Thomas needs to understand is that the People's Military Service Law is legally enacted and officially approved in line with the Section 385 and 386 of the Constitution of Myanmar. It is not, as you accuse, a tool of persecution. It is simply a public military service law similar to those practiced not only in neighboring ASEAN countries but also in nations around the world. This law is implemented as needed in accordance with current situation for national defense. Does your CSW organization have the courage to demand the countries like South Korea, Singapore, Switzerland and Israel to repeal their conscription laws? Or are you simply trying to interfere in the Myanmar's politics by taking side? You must clearly understand that it is not allowed. There is no tolerance for interruption and interference by any international organization or individual to repeal a law granted the Constitution of a sovereign nation. Your facade of humanity completely disappears in your final demand. You ask that fuel supplies for Myanmar's Tatmadaw should be targeted and cut off. This is not a demand for humanitarian aid, but a demand for military affairs. Your genuine purpose is to undermine the air capabilities of the Myanmar's Tatmadaw, that is, crushing the terrorist groups, and to provide cover for the terrorists. Subsequently, you requested aid for the direct flow to local civil society organizations. In reality, you revealed yourself that you were attempting to bypass the legitimate government and channel illegal funds and supplies to NUG-PDF-affiliated groups. Because of your actions, the CSW group must be regarded as a group masquerading as a religious organization, and you must be regarded as a supporter of terrorism and as interfering in the internal affairs of a sovereign nation. You, Western Bloc-affiliated media outlets and Ingos alike are completely disconnected from the genuine will of the people. The genuine desires of the majority of citizens living in the country are not to be imposed by your sanction or your interference. The genuine desire of the people is to end the terrorist acts of the NUG-PDF terrorist groups, such as the killing of innocent civilians, the arson attacks on schools, and the mine attacks against roads, bridges as quickly as possible. What we want is to end the violent acts and to have peaceful, stable and happy family lives. You claim your CSW group is a religious organization. However, you are interfering in internal affairs of a sovereign nation, inflaming political conflict through religion, and providing indirect support to terrorist groups. Here, I would like to remind you that such actions can greatly damage the CSW group's reputation. Witnessing your actions, you can be regarded as a supporter of terrorists from an ordinary citizen's point of view. Accordingly, we, the ordinary people, call for an end to your false allegations against the government as well as the Tatmadaw, an end to your support to acts of terrorism, and a respect to Myanmar's sovereignty. Through this letter, we also want to make it clear to you and the international community that the government of Myanmar has fully legal authority to respond to any actions that encroach the sovereignty of the nation. Aung Shin. This article is solely the view of a citizen who value Myanmar's sovereignty, peace and stability, and it is no relation to religion.